Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is View from the Frontline. This is our Knowledgeware Leaders Forum. I kind of want to give you a little quick background on why we have this. So we established this forum a couple years ago. So we used to do this conference in person, and it gave everybody a chance to interact with the industry leaders and really pick their brain about some insights, some challenges that they have or challenges they anticipate. But now that we switched to this virtual type format, that was one of the things that we were lacking is getting our leaders to kind of present those insights and the guidance to the audience. So what we've done is we've collected some questions from the past conference that we know that there's a specific interest in. And I am going to moderate our discussion with our presenters. So my name is Steve Boysberg. I'm a Knowledgeware consultant at Oros Knowledge Systems. I've been there for 13 years. Prior to that, I actually worked for Mr. Gene Kaufman there at Ford for a while. So let me introduce our team members. First, she has over 35 years of experience at General Motors. She's currently the group manager in knowledge management, a position that she's held for the past 13 years. We have Miss Wendy Lang.
Hello.
With over 40 years of experience at Ford Motor Company in research and advanced manufacturing, the recent retiree and former technical leader for digital engineering, and my former supervisor, Mr. Gene Kaufman. He's the current senior R&D manager at Stryker and a former Oros implementation lead at Eaton Automotive, Mr. Mike Preston. And last but not least, he's a senior manager for process methods, warranty recovery for the North America region at Stellantis, Mr. Bruce Williams. So let's kind of get into this a little bit and how we're going to go about this. So we have some questions that were gathered from past presentations and past forums. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give each individual a chance to answer the question, but I'm going to vary who gets to answer the question first. So with that, let's get started. So the first question that we have kind of is really one that we get a lot. And it really stems from kind of understanding that whenever we try to deploy new processes or introduce new tool sets, often they're met with a lot of resistance. There's several challenges that that kind of pop up when we're trying to get things established. So the first question I have is for Wendy, if you can answer this first. Did the executive sponsorship play a role in your ability to gain user buy-in when you initiated the Knowledgeware process at General Motors?
Absolutely. I mean, getting anything really rolled out takes some kind of word from the top that this is important and you need to do it, right? And we actually had started a best practice process documenting our best practices before we found Oros, and leadership had really put an emphasis on that. So then it was just a matter of them continuing that support to get it moved into Oros and still thought of as important.
Gotcha. So I want to follow this up with Gene, because I know that there's a slightly different experience there at Ford. So Gene, can you give your take on executive sponsorship and the role it played at Ford when we initiated the Knowledgeware process there?
Yeah, I think initially it didn't really, right? We were one of the first adopters of E2KS or Oros as it's now known. And so it was really a much more grassroots and, user base. We brought the technology in and applied it once, and then it began growing to different areas. To get standardization, as Wendy said, though, then some type of executive sponsorship is needed once we rolled certain communities to practice globally, but usually the initial kickoff is grassroots, and then to make it global, we need executive help.
Yep. So Mike, during your time at Eaton, can you describe the role that executive sponsorship had there when you guys deployed the Knowledgeware process?
Yeah, we had a couple of, I'll say, isolated teams. There were teams that were in different product lines that were users, and I think the role that executive, leadership played was really level setting everybody on expectations, right? So once kind of a grassroots team They found value. They wanted to keep doing, wanted to keep driving it. Once that kind of made its way up in the organization, then it became an expectation for other groups. And so groups that didn't know anything about it started to learn about it. Those that knew about it kind of got an accelerated push to go faster. So it helped with that multiplication of users.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Bruce, with your experience at Stellantis, can you describe how executive sponsorship played a role in the ability to get the Knowledgeware process initiated?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's absolutely critical working with the executives and so forth. One of the things that we do with the Oro system is lessons learned. So lessons learned can be anything from a recall, severity such as a recall. You want to make sure that you don't repeat that opportunity as you move forward, to something simple down on the shop floor that you're looking to make sure that the teams don't implement again. So without the executive sponsorship, the project frankly wouldn't have happened. And honestly, it came from the top of our house, which made it very, very easy and seamless for us to integrate into our work life here.
Excellent. I appreciate that. So it's actually kind of a blended response there. I mean, some of you guys really had that critical buy-in from that executive leadership, kind of pushing the concept down to get people to go on. But, a couple of you also mentioned there was a grassroots effort. So there's that bottom-up process that kind of started based on the functionality that and value that was seen. I guess one takeaway, it kind of really depends on, where you're starting within the organization, what that primary use case is, and then how maybe you need to go about addressing it, whether you do need that executive sponsorship, or if it's something that you can address at a tactical level and then build from there.
Yeah, Steve, if you don't mind, just real quick, I'll just jump in here. One of the cool things is once we got the lessons learned, I'll say COP implemented, then it kind of to grow from there. So, PPAP modules, CQI 14, the team really took hold of it. And when you speak of grassroots efforts, they really took it and they said, hey, I think I can do extra stuff with this that'll help the company. And it kind of spread like wildfire. I'm sure that the other team members here will agree with that. It's kind of neat to watch.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing, right? I mean, once you can show value in a particular area, it helps to develop a common understanding within the organization and see what's achievable by a particular group and see how the process change, how the application can make a difference. And it does seem like those next groups that are much quicker to join in and adapt and then start executing the Knowledgeware process, and it kind of repeats itself. And that's exactly what we saw at Ford too, Gene. I mean, it started with a small group and just kept growing and growing and growing as more people started to learn. But that kind of plays into my second question I have for you guys. And I think I'll start with you first, Gene. Once everything started to get initiated, once there was that, initial momentum, can you kind of describe how much effort and energy was required to continue that momentum, to get people to continue to participate in the process, to continue letting it grow?
I mean, it was pretty self-sustaining, as people get started and get going. The effort really is around the new users and new groups that keep coming into the system, right? Up until I retired, we were continuing to add new communities, new user groups that often have multiple communities of practice. But so that's where the effort was, and trying to take their requirements and influence the direction of the software and new versions. So we put most of our energy there in terms of, but we did have a global governance team to make sure we got all the input from different groups to keep things going.
Excellent. And Bruce, can you take that same question? So you guys are one of the kind of more recent adopters to the process. Can you kind of explain how much energy you're continuing to put into the process to keep it going?
Absolutely, happy to. So I don't actually have to put a ton of energy into it. Like I said earlier, it's actually spreading like wildfire. So the teams are taking hold, and I think that's really what you want, is you want the teams to understand the value of the system and actually to invigorate it. So, the times that I typically get involved, it's hey, we ran into a certain roadblock, or we need a little bit of guidance on how this should look going forward. But very little energy. I think once the teams understood the value and can see the results. And by the way, I'll just add, we use this as a two-way communication, I'd say, tool with their suppliers. It's been absolutely just fantastic. So for me, I think the tool has showed its value and has proved dividends, at least for us.
Excellent. I appreciate it. So Wendy, let me kind of take it to your direction now. I mean, as with Ford, you have a tremendous footprint. I mean, just tons of use cases, a tremendous amount of users. Do you have the same experience that Bruce and Gene have?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, myself and mainly Christine Brasso, who is our overall admin, who kind of coordinates, runs, sets up most of the stuff in the tool. Once we got best practices rolling and people started learning the tool, understanding what it could do. I mean, we're about 12 years in now, and daily we have people coming to us, hey, we want to try to put this in the tool. I mean, we have well over 30 major processes in the tool, well over 50 issue types. I think we're almost to 1,000 COPs or something. So, yeah, it just, people start to use it and they go, hey, this would work good for this other process. And then next thing we know, we're setting that up for them. So our effort is really just configuring for people and helping them figure it out. But once people start to see the value, it really takes off. And we've grown in our, we started out very simple with KPACs at best practices, and we've expanded now to so much more in the tool and really taking more advantage of all the functionality. And you'll see some of that tomorrow in Jerry Hansen and Daryl Yarborough's presentation with the Oros team.
I'll be part of that.
Yes, and Steve.
So there's a kind of an ad hoc follow-on question for you specifically because Gene mentioned it. I mean, with that growth, one of the things he said is, they adopted a governance process to make sure that the growth through the application was consistent and they're kind of arbitrate any kind of issues that might happen. Did you have a similar process at GM, knowing that you guys have roughly 1,000 communities of practice?
Yeah, so we have some high-level governance in the fact that Christine and I are the only overall admins, so we're the only ones that can, mainly Christine, can set things up. And but then as far as the individual COPs, we've kind of given them flexibility to do what they want to do and make the tool work for them, right? That's the beauty of it. It's configurable, right? And people are creative and ingenious, and the things they've come up with to set their communities up to work for them is really impressive.
That's fantastic. Now, Mike, I would pose this to you, but I know that you recently moved from Eaton to Stryker. So everything would be kind of addressed kind of in the past tense of what's been done. So I think instead of asking you how much energy, your former company is putting into it, I think I'm going to start the third question with you. And this really comes about because of the disruption that we know that the pandemic has had on the workplace. I mean, look at most of us, we're at home. And so one of the questions that I often get is, what type of impact has the Knowledgeware process had on your ability to retain knowledge and continue sharing knowledge within your organization, knowing that so many people have transitioned into different roles. People are no longer communicating with the tribal knowledge at the water cooler. So could you just kind of elaborate a little bit on your experiences at Eaton on how well the knowledge-aware process has impacted, or how poorly the Knowledgeware process has impacted knowledge retention and knowledge sharing within that organization?
It definitely had a positive impact. I mean, one of the things that we're all been kind of dancing around on this topic is, the autonomy that the communities have. That's a huge enabler for this tool as opposed to other tools, other systems that are a little bit more top-down heavy. When engineers feel that they have a sense of ownership in their community and how it's configured, that engagement goes through the roof. And so that engagement then helps you kind of bridge those, remote kind of hybrid working scenarios, it's a huge enabler of it. It really is. I mean, technology today is obviously is an accelerating phenomenon, but it has definitely helped make sure everybody's using the latest and greatest, at the time that they need it, and has helped to minimize kind of that decentralization that happens when we're all working in various locations.
Excellent, thank you. So I want to switch over to Bruce and ask you the same question.
So I'd say with the remote workspace, and keep in mind that here where I work at Stellantis, we're still in kind of very much a hybrid model. Matter of fact, we just opened up our main building CTC last Friday. So how has it helped us? I would say it's helped us tremendously. As I stated earlier, it's a communication tool between us and our suppliers. Without Oros and some of the flexibility within the Oros system, honestly, we wouldn't have been able to communicate with our suppliers at supplier assembly plants from a modular perspective on a daily basis for many months during the COVID period, which was extremely helpful. I would say knowledge retention, it's been fantastic because I can go in and I can take a look at a certain part and understand what it was risked at, what it PPAP'd to, and get those details, and we can share that very, very quickly with others within the organization. So Oros was a big player for us, especially during the pandemic, as far as knowledge and knowledge transfer.
Excellent. And then Wendy, can I get your experience with the impact that the Knowledgeware process has had on remote work and knowledge retention?
Yeah, and I think, as the others have said, it's been very, very important because we can continue on with our design reviews, with all the different things we're doing, and the knowledge is there where everyone can get to it, no matter where they're working from. So it's really been critical to making sure, as even new people come in while we're working remote, that they have access to the key knowledge they need to do the job.
Perfect. And Gene, do you have any comments on this question?
Yeah, I mean, the others have expressed it well, right? The tool is there. There was really no change because the data and the information was there, contained in all the different COPs. We also did leverage Oros as part of our return to work process. To make sure that all of our facilities, maintained all the protocols. So we actually leveraged the tool to help us, get our facilities up and running as soon as possible. So
that's fantastic. And I do remember that workflow. When the pandemic started, I saw the team members working on that, and pretty interesting stuff. So I want to go into my final question for you before we start taking questions from the audience. And this one has to do with some functionality that we recently developed. And I know some of you are taking advantage of it. And it's the fact that Oros IQ can share knowledge outside of your core organization with trusted partners, to your suppliers and vendors and those kind of individuals. So I want to get your take on, are you using this feature? And if so, what type of value do you see it bringing? Is it valuable to you? How has those individuals that you're sharing the knowledge with, how have they responded? So I'm going to start with Bruce with this one, because I know that you mentioned a couple of times that's basically what you started with, lessons learned. And so can you kind of address this question?
Yeah, I would, happy to, by the way. I'm passionate about it. I would not start with actually lessons learned. I would actually start with a PPAP and, kind of the interaction with suppliers. And anyone here that's done, I would say, advanced quality planning work knows that, many meetings are needed. You got to share lots of information. The beautiful thing that we found with Oros is that this information can be answered and even put into the system for the team to review. So it eliminates unnecessary meetings, unnecessary travel. We're able to do this, concurrently, so a supplier can input information at the same time that our team is reviewing it and taking a look to see if that part is ready to go, or for the supplier quality engineer to actually go on site to the supplier facility and validate that indeed the part's ready for production or use in our vehicles. So for me, it's huge. I think it's a huge time saver. It's collaborative, and I'll touch on the other, making sure the other COP that we have is making sure that our suppliers are ready. Start their day from production perspective, making sure that they have the right broadcast. There's the right number of trucks and trailers, manpower levels, and so forth during the COVID period. That used to take us many, many hours in the morning to gather this information just to make sure that some of our facilities could actually go into production successfully for that day. So without that collaboration, I'm sure we would have stumbled much more in the COVID time period than what we did. So yeah, it's a great collaborative tool. If you haven't tried it or haven't used it for collaboration between yourselves or your partners, I would encourage everyone out there to certainly start.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Wendy, is General Motors taking advantage of this functionality?
Oh yeah, this one is a big one for us. And I think we help to beg and plead for this functionality because not only does it help us in our knowledge we want to share with our suppliers and need to share with our suppliers, and the way the assessment functionality is set up so that we can put an assessment out there for them to answer, and they can get to it. They can see what they need to see to do the job. They can get to the KPAC. But we don't have to worry about them seeing what they shouldn't see, right? So we've got that ability to let them see what we want them to see and not see what we don't want them to see. And it also gives us that same ability with our partners that we're working with. We have a joint venture with Honda. We can give them assessments to fill out that give them access to what they need to see, but not what we don't want to share with them. So it's really, and a lot of the communication we did with suppliers before in some of these assessments was Excel sheets getting sent back and forth. So then your data is always out of date. Maybe somebody didn't get the latest spreadsheet, whatever. So now it's in one place where everyone can see it, has the latest information, and can see what they need to see and work collaboratively. So yeah, we use it tremendously. The other kind of sharing functionality that's out there is the syncing functionality, where you can actually sync data between two instances of Oros, and we use that with our partners in China.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Gene, I'm not aware of any use of the functionality at Ford. Is there some workflows at Ford that are using the sharing?
So
partner sharing?
We haven't used the partner portal yet, at least not as when I retired, right? So, but we have been evaluating it for a while. We had some other priorities that we focused on instead of implementing that. However, we have had our suppliers in the system. I think, as you're aware, Steve, that through another mean where they were directly into our system. So we have worked with suppliers and shared information with suppliers, and it's key. We just haven't used the new technology yet.
Gotcha. So with that, those are the end of the questions that I had that we collected. So I want to get to some of the comments that we have in here, and I think Carl Hart has a really good question. So I'm going to pose this one to you, Mike. So what Carl is asking, he says, it'd be interesting to hear about different approaches used to train and teach engineers on how to develop knowledge packets that ensure consistency to the ideal characteristics of being concise, granular, actionable. So can you describe, Mike, in your time at Eaton when you were, kind of leading that effort to develop some knowledge, capturing the knowledge, how you went about the process of training your teams to capture in an efficient and a consistent way?
Yeah, so we actually had gone through prior, a few years prior, the seed project process from Oros, and basically took those series of methods, modified them to fit our needs, and then used that as a means to onboard every new community admin. That definitely helped to streamline the learning process. for how to bring people up to speed for not only just how to use the tool, but how we intended to use the tool, which every company is going to have their flavor, their global attributes, things like that. So it was that really helped a lot.
Yeah, so you kind of developed some templates, right? So once you created that initial community of practice, you use kind of that as a template for going forward. That's fantastic. And I guess we'll end with Wendy, knowing that you have 1,000 communities of practice. I mean, that's a lot of teaching to do. So how did you go about it?
So we try to have subject matter experts for each of the different areas that kind of own their space. And so we train them, and hopefully they train all the people in their space. And then we have different forums at GM where we can talk to the knowledge experts in the different spaces. And so once a year at least, we get into one of those forums and talk about the importance of writing the quality information down with being specific and actionable, and so that it's useful to the end users, not just a book they're never going to read, right? So generally the subject matter expert for each area is really a key for us.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think that's pretty consistently applied across different organizations, where you kind of have that subject matter expert individual that helps train and it really promotes the concept of their community of practice. So it looks like we're out of time. I appreciate our panel. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all of your guidance. And it looks like Amy's back to let us go to the next one.